everybody. How is everybody? Yeah. Great. All right. I feel like I'm doing a stand-up. So what I thought I'd do today is talk a little bit about some of the stuff I teach to my college students. A lot of whom are going into video game design or animation or like the concept art. I'm going to talk about some of the design principles that are used throughout all types of art practice throughout history, some of the core ideas that artists use to design their painting. So I know a lot of you kids who are really good at drawing and painting, like one of the big focuses at the beginning is being able to draw realistically and draw accurately, or paint realistically and accurately. But one of the most important things to learn how to do as you develop is how to organize your picture in a way that makes it clear. So when you're trying to tell a story, you can tell it effectively and learn how to communicate to people using these same principles. So they're used in film, photography, motion pictures, game design. These are just some of the core principles of design. And then I'll talk a little bit about the creative process and some of the ways that you can develop your artwork and design your artwork a little bit better in the future. Just a few things to think about. I won't, stay here forever, and hopefully I have some cool images to show you. Okay, so you can start. First slide. Okay, good. So one of the most important ideas in painting is to have balance in your artwork. You want when people look at it to feel like it's not crowded in one part or everything's not spread out. So there's two basic ways. One is to use what's called symmetry. This is artwork where things are centered. So this would be like a pattern design. Religious art often uses this way of design principles, and it's very effective and simple. So a lot of people tend to just put something in the center and make both sides of the picture about the same. But in Western art, it's much more likely to use asymmetry. So what happens in these kinds of artworks, I don't know if you guys can see down the bottom, the artworks are a little bit more dispersed and spread out, but they still have good balance. So this is the first basic design principle to think about when you're organizing your pictures. And this is the kind of stuff you want to be doing when you're sketching. Before you actually start painting it, you want to be working at this, trying to make designs that are balanced. Okay, next slide. So, okay, we'll just go through a few of these basic ideas. So the next idea is called unity. When you make a picture, it should feel like everything belongs together in the picture. You don't want just a bunch of stuff. So it should feel like they belong together. And some of the most powerful ways of doing that are proximity. So one idea is if you just have stuff, it doesn't look like it belongs together. But as soon as they get grouped together, they'll start to feel like they have a connection between each other. So that's one way to do it. Another is repetition, is to repeat shapes. So in this sculpture, they're repeating blocky square shapes, and in here they're repeating the shapes of the figures. And then continuation is another way where things subtly lead into each other. So this is just one way to sort of make stuff feel like it belongs together. You could do it like having all the same color, or things that look like they belong together, like different types of still life things that, like apples and grapes and a wine glass, sort of feel like they belong together. Okay, next slide. Okay, another really important thing is to understand negative space. So negative space is what most people don't ever look at. Most people would always focus on the positive shapes, but the space around your objects is just as important as the object itself. In fact, it's almost more important in a way. So here, if you tend to focus on the figure with the tree, what's really making this design is these spaces between the trees and the figure is what the real organizing principle around how to develop your artwork. So sort of looking at the spaces between things and thinking about them is important. Okay, next slide. Okay, so one thing we're trying to do in a picture is make people's eyes move through the picture in an actual way. And we'll talk a little bit about how to move the eye around, but one of the most important ideas in art is to have a clear focal point. So in this picture, it's Jesus who's the focus. This is the Last Supper, very famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci. And you can see how Jesus' head, even this blurry side, is still quite clear. What's one of the ways that we're leading our eyes to that important focus in the picture? One is diagonal line. If you look carefully, all of the diagonals in here are all pointing towards his head. And that's not an accident. He's designed to be placed in a position where the major lines through the picture are leading your eye towards the focal point. So anytime you can get things to the point is very important. Another idea is contrast. So here, because you have a dark figure against a light background, you'll look at this area. Or here, you have these light figures and then those gray figures. This is all interesting, but your eye's going to end up there. And that's the key to communication with your artwork. If people don't know where to look, they won't understand what you're trying to talk about in your picture. So by leading your eye and making a clear focus, you're communicating well and you're learning how to be a good storyteller. As well as an artist who makes beautiful pictures, you want to be able to clearly guide people's eyes through your picture in a logical, systematic way. Okay, next slide. Another way to be contrasting shape. So if you're looking at all these shapes here, that one has a hole in it. It'll tend to stick out more. Or here we're repeating shapes. Like I said before, to create unity. And then we're changing the size and the shape there. And that's making those little shoes stick out like crazy in that photograph. So photographers, painters, they're all using the same basic ideas. Okay, next slide. Where do you place the focal point? So this is really important. This is called, I'm sure some of you kids have probably heard this already, it's called the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds, whatever your picture looks like, if you divide it into thirds, these areas where those lines cross are the important areas in the picture for putting your stuff. You don't want to put it here, not in the middle, because that tends to make the eye not move through the picture. So what happens is you just stare at the middle of the picture and you don't explore the whole picture. So by putting things off center, it'll lead your eye up into the picture and you'll start to get a very natural feeling focal point. So it's very easy, just whatever you're going to put your important thing in there, just put it a little off center on the third and it's always going to look better. Okay, next slide. These are the secrets, by the way. Like every artist knows this, and this is like how artists organize their work. And again, it's in movies, TV, you've been looking at this stuff your whole lives. And that's why when you're looking at a movie film and there's all these people, you still know where to look. Like you look at Tom Cruise running through the crowd and you know exactly where to look. It's not an accident. It's been organized visually to guide your eye to the place where they want you to look. So as an artist, we need to control that. Here's another basic idea. It's using simple shapes to organize your picture. So this is like a circular shape, and there's the focus. This is a triangle shape. These are like two big blocky squares. So using simple shapes like that should be powerfully underneath all this stuff that's going on. A simple organizing shape will really help. Okay, next. Okay, what do you want to avoid when you're doing a picture? You want to avoid tangents. So this is a classic thing to look for. It's a confusing part of your picture where the space isn't clear and it really sticks your design up and it gets really hard for people to look at. So what's a tangent? That's like here. See how their elbows hitting that side of that sign, but it looks like it's stuck on it? Or hair touching that side there? That creates a confusing part of your picture. You have to find those in your work. All you kids out there, find the tangents and get rid of them. And then your design will be much more clear, your space will be clearer, and your eye movement won't get stuck. Okay, I think there's another tangent after this. Here it is. See, he doesn't like it either. His elbow is stuck on the side of the picture. Does that make sense? What the tangents mean? Okay. So how do you fix a tangent? What you look for is cropping. You try to overlap, or you try to separate. And depending on what you're looking for, you can either cut that off or leave a little space there. But you always want to be looking for tangents as you draw and paint and try to get those out. Okay, next slide. Okay, so all that in mind, this is some Marvel Comics, 1970s style stuff. This is from a great book called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which is a sort of old-fashioned comic book, but it's probably the best overall book for teaching stuff. So what we want to look at is like, this side is not as good as that side. If you look at the two as a design and a composition, see if you can see some of the things I was talking about, and see if you can see why the ones on the right are better. So what makes this one better? Here, why is it more exciting and cooler? Anybody have an idea? Yes. Yes, yeah, good. It's closer too, like if you're going to show something breaking through, you want it to be exciting. So they changed the design so it's closer, so it feels more powerful. And it's tilted also, which also makes it more exciting. But you see how here it's a symmetrical design? See how that is just right in the center? Not so good. Here is a little off center and more exciting. Same thing here. See how it's 1, 2, 3? Boring design, because it's symmetrical. Same on both sides, not interesting. Here, interesting. Good cropping, different sizes. And better negative shapes. See the shape there? That's a negative shape. That's very important for the design. So when you do a drawing, you want to think about it. Do the drawing and then figure out, can I move the figures around? Can I move the camera so I get a better shot? How can I put them in the frame? Here it's gesture. So this is really important for figure drawing. These figures are not communicating the same level of action that you're seeing here. So like when you're trying to show an action, you need to use a very powerful gesture. So if I was going to show someone throwing something, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't show a picture like this. Now someone might be doing this when they're throwing, but that doesn't communicate throwing. This does. Or this. You have to show the action in your picture. If you want people to understand it, you have to exaggerate and emphasize. So that's happening in all of these. Okay, next. So here's another one. This is even more simple, but you'll see the same sort of ideas. See? Symmetrical, boring. Not symmetrical, not so boring. And better gesture. See how he's leaning forward? He's sticking his head in his face a little more. It's better gesture. Same thing here. Not so good, better gesture. Symmetrical, not symmetrical. Better camera angle. Does that make sense? You can sort of see, you can just see it's better. You know, it's more exciting, it's more, communicates better. I have so many students who have these incredible ideas for comic books. They have like 3 planets and 4 races on each planet, and they're in this incredible long-term war going on, and they have all these ideas for characters and ideas, but when they do their comic book, it's drawn like this, and no one really wants to read it because it's just boring visually. Does that make sense? So you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but you have to design your pictures so it really communicates well and is exciting and interesting, and that's what's going to get people interested in your work and really get them engaged and watching. Okay, next slide. Almost done. Okay, how do you come up with a good design? What do you do? What are these called? Anybody? You know what they're called? Yes. Almost done. There are thumbnails. So these are called thumbnail designs. And this is a project where the artist was trying to show a person on a horse coming up to a big castle. And these are all just thumbnails to sort of show different possible ways of showing it before they did the actual painting. So thumbnails are like the important aspect of design. Before you really start the picture, you want to spend some time doing small, different varieties in your picture. So you just kind of move things around, change the design a little bit, but don't really finish it, and explore the possibilities in this piece before you start actually making it. Because what happens with most artists is they get very excited about an idea, about an image, and it flashes into their head, and that's what they want to paint, which is fine, but somewhere near that image is a better version of it. And as an artist, you have to figure out how can I explore the space around my idea to come up with the best image. So the best way to do that is to do small, multiple versions of the same image, 4 or 5 or 6, and and see which one's better. And not worry about it too much, but just try to vary things, move things around, change it, see what happens. You can't really know until you see them next to each other, then you decide which one's better. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of what, these are storyboards. This is what I did when I got out of school. When I was a sophomore at school, in art school, one of my teachers had a very big storyboard job for a movie, and he couldn't finish it, and he asked me if I'd help him with it, which is the greatest honor of my life. I was actually working as a student, and so I did storyboards for years after that. Just I didn't really plan it, but it happened. So these are storyboards for movies, and this is how movies get made. They're drawn first. So the idea is she's going to be here, there's going to be this stuff in the background, and then that's the actual finished version in the movie. And every movie you've ever seen gets drawn like this first. These are always storyboards. And these are very small, quick drawings. These might take 20 minutes to do. So you can see she's supposed to be talking to two guys, and there they are. And then there's this overhead shot of them, and there it is. It ends up a little different in the movie sometimes, but this is how the whole movie is organized. Okay, next slide. So here's some more thumbnails. You can see its basic idea is this person's here, and you see how simple the design is. It's just a couple, it's like 3 values, very simple shapes, so you don't get all too much thinking about how to finish it. And then what you do, like if you're working for a video game company, you go into your meeting and you have these thumbnails, and I'll put them up on the wall, and then your director will be like, okay, I like this one, I don't like those two, work on this one more. Then you go and work on it, and then bring it back, and that's how you design and organize your projects. Okay, almost done. Next slide. This is a friend of mine. This is actually my teacher who gave me that job. These are thumbnails designed for a museum of aviation in Washington, D.C. So these are drawings he made to show possible ways of making as inspiration and possible designs for an actual physical thing. So this kind of drawing just happens when you're designing like a car, or designing architecture, or designing a product. All of this stuff gets drawn sort of the same way, so you can work on your design. Okay, next. Okay, what's the great way to design stuff? Like, what's the really powerful way? Have a sketchbook. Have your own sketchbook and work in it. If you younger artists who are on screens a lot, it's totally great. Digital art's wonderful. But there's something about having a sketchbook and keeping it with you and drawing constantly in it. And you'll see all the great artists have sketchbooks. If you haven't looked online, go Google any artist that you really like and look through their sketchbooks online, and you'll see how they develop their ideas and how they work out their sort of artistic process. So this is a very famous comic book artist who's incredibly influential. He's a French artist named Mobius. This is a page from his sketchbook. That's just a pen drawing. So it's very beautiful, but he's working on some designs and stuff. Okay, next sketchbook. This is my teacher, Baron's story. This is one of his sketchbook pages, and it's how I learned to sketch from him. He has over 300 sketchbooks, and every page looks like that. Some of them are fully painted. So he has thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of artwork like this that are just in his sketchbooks in his house. But it's how he developed his style, how he developed his abilities. Okay, next. That's one of my sketches. So I was thinking, okay, I need to get better at drawing heads. So I drew a whole lot of heads in my sketchbook. That's like a tiny sketchbook page. Okay, next one. So then this one was from an actual jazz performance. So I went to the club, and I was sitting there, and I was watching this guy play bass, and I had my sketchbook, and I drew that. So everywhere you go, you should have something to draw with and be drawing everything. Just draw everything you can think of, not the stuff you like to draw all the time, but just everything. And that's going to give you the mental vocabulary and the capacity to really make your art look great. Okay, next. Another sketchbook page, that's from a live model. They were posing for me in my class, and I took my sketchbook out and did a drawing of their face. So you can get pretty high level in your sketchbooks too, but sometimes it's just sketches. Okay, next. And this one was done in a museum. This is from a Rembrandt painting at the Legion of Honor. And I sat there for about 3 hours with my sketchbook and drew that from the actual painting. So you can use it to draw real people, copy paintings, whatever. Okay, next. Okay, so let's look at a couple artworks here. And I want you guys to try to figure out where the focus is. So if you can figure out where the focal point is, just raise your hand. Anybody? Yes? In there? Yeah. Okay, why is that the area of focus? Look at all that cool stuff. But everyone in this room looking at this knows that your eye goes there. What brings your eye there? What? Yes? That clouds are leading your eye? Yes. All the movement in the picture is pulling you towards them. Everything's moving towards them. So there's a lot of direction. Remember I talked about the lines pointing towards Jesus' head? It's the same thing there. There's directional lines, especially here, this big triangle. It's also got more value. You see how that's the area of highest value? It's got the darkest dark and the lightest light. There's also not a lot around them, which makes them stick out very, very strongly. None of that's on accident. Everything there is absolutely clinically designed and scientifically done so it works perfectly, you know? Okay, next. Okay, this is more subtle. This is a Degas painting. Degas is one of the greatest artists ever. And what do you think the focal point of this one is? Anybody? So as you look through here, where does your eye rest? It should maybe rest on her or on him, right? Okay. So well, obviously you've got all of these figures together who make a group, and then they're separate. They're also on the third. You'll see the position they're in is on a third. So that's a very powerfully designed focal point. Even though there's a lot going on, we sort of know to look at all this stuff, but he's the important figure in the painting. Okay, next up. So what's the most important here? This is really cool, right? It's the artist's reflection in a mirrored ball. It's amazing, but that's not where your eye looks. Your eye looks there, right? Why? It's on a third, it's off center. It's also bigger than everything, and it's brighter. So your eye's moving there. And then this is leading your eye. Look, this leads to this leads to this, and this leads to the violin. So each shape is pulling your eye through the picture up to the focal point. Okay, next. Look at a couple more. Okay. This one has a really powerful shape, right? The triangle with the focal point on the top is one of the most powerful shapes. This is on almost every Renaissance painting where there's multiple figures. It's a triangle with the most important thing towards the top. You can see it's also got balance, but it's not symmetrical at all. All these little shapes here and this big shape balance each other. So it's just beautifully composed. Okay, next. And it's not just Western art. I'm sure you all, as you look at this, you're gonna go right here, right? Right to that. And maybe your second focal point will be that element there. So in a good painting, there's not just one focal point. There's usually 2 or 3. And they're in order though. There'll be one that's stronger and then a couple that are not quite as strong. That's what really leads your eye to the picture. So what's leading us to him? These lines are pointing towards him, and then even though they're small, they still really stick out beautifully. It also helps that it's a figure. You know, when you have a landscape and you have a figure, we'll tend to look at the figure. Okay, come on more. All right, so these are some drawings from one of my classes at the Academy. And one's not so good, and one's good. And I'm sure you can all tell which one got the A and which one got a C. Even though I love Elmo, it's all great. But why is this focal point not as strong? What's it, yes? What's that? There's nothing really sticking out, you know what I mean? I mean, this is a little brighter, but it doesn't feel strong enough. And maybe Elmo should be the focal point, but he's not dark enough. In this one, it's very clear. And you can see the movement. You see how this moves like this? Pointing your eye right towards where the artist wants you to look. Okay, so there's a couple more. Okay, so there's another good example. These are charcoal drawings. These are first semester college students. But most of them are sort of like you guys who've been drawing since they were really young. You know, I think this person probably has just started, even though they're in the same class. It's quite a different level. So, anyways, again, here there's nothing really sticking out, and then here it's just very, very clear that it's the shoe. You know, it's also amazingly rendered. You know, it's just a beautiful drawing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's a nice piece of concept art. Okay, so based on what I've said, let's just look at this for a minute. Everyone agrees that the unicorn's the focal point, right? That's obvious, right? But now you want to think, like, why? Like, don't just look at a piece of artwork and go, oh, that's cool. To really get good, you have to start digging. You have to start excavating. You have to get into the underside of the artwork and see why and how it works. So, what would be some of the things that would make that stick out? It's what? Yes. Okay, good. Yes. Yes. They said that the value is very different here. So what creates unity is how the whole painting has the same value to it, and then there's one part that's really bright and really strong. And what leads your eye towards what's leading your eye towards the unicorn? Anybody? Yes. The light is, but what in the background is leading? Yeah, the light coming down for sure. What else is pointing at the unicorn? Yes. Good. Yes. You see they're almost like fingers pointing where they want you to look. So the trees in the background are leading your eye here and here. Also, when the figure is looking at the focal point, you'll look at it too. So if you have people who are like looking over where you want them to look in the picture, that's also going to make it much easier for the person to follow your eye to the right spot. And then the secondary focal point would be this. So this is the second focal point. So you have the major focal point and the second focal point. And they're interacting and the story becomes really clear and easy to see. Does that make sense? Cool, I think that's good. I have a couple more slides, but they're just in the same one. Okay, so here's, hey, look, okay, good. There's my analysis. So they're looking at each other, there are trees pointing, and you can see the unicorn's on the third. As you know, it's you can design and make amazing artwork without following these principles, but they work so well, and everybody uses them, and they're universal. And once you know them, your storytelling levels up like a lot. So I encourage you to study design and to get a sketchbook and to draw on your sketchbook. And also, the next time you make a painting, before you jump in to really do it, see if you can spend more time designing it, thinking about design principles, and see if you can get a better piece out of it that way. All right? Okay. I think that's it. Thank you so much.